Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk for about an hour or so. It's 10 to 11. Let's plan a lunch break from 12 to 1. So everybody on camera knows. 2 blocks down from here. When you walk out, you make a right-hand turn. There's a place called Rainbow Acres. It's one of LA's old health food, health everything you want. You can have a lunch of homeopathics if you care. It's all there, and let's do our best to keep it 12 to 1. So, you know, I don't want, some of you have come a long way, so I don't want to waste your time. So let's do 12 to 1. Okay, brain food. As it turns out, the brain's favorite food is light. It's actually quite willing to skip photosynthesis, because photosynthesis, of course, starts with sunlight. Along comes this thing called a plant with some gas and some sugar, and it ends up creating the whole thing, and then an animal eats the plant, we eat the plant, or the animal, or both, and then we reverse the whole thing back down to the point at a molecular level, then down to an atomic level, where you crack the code, you get this famous quantum leap where you bump an electron. This is in the mitochondrial ATP chain. And when you bump an electron, it spits out a biophoton. And in the ATP chain, we even know the 3 principal wavelengths of that light. And I've had the good chance to be a part of that, where you put an IV right into the vein and you do certain wavelengths to upregulate the 3 main steps of the ATP process. It's crazy. Luckily, the most important, the main one, is in the visible light range. It's not exact. 633, 635, 640, in that range works perfectly fine. Of course, whoever manufactures the device will say their wavelength is the holy grail. But even a low-level laser, although monochromic, still has a little bit of a variation. So, you know, a 640 is kind of a 638, 39, mostly 640, a little 641, but you'll say, listen, it's pure enough, we'll call it 640. So brain food. I had mentioned earlier that a complex adaptive system is capable of successful, ongoing self-organization if it has enough energy and the connectivity has integrity. Those are the 2 things. So their brain food is about the energy thing. According to the research that I've read, and I've read a lot of it, and it's from very credible sources, and this surprised me a lot, but this is the advancing biophysics, mostly out of Europe, mostly out of Germany, with other European countries, but that the energy requirements, the ATP, you know, your body weight in ATP, that the amount of energy that we get from nutrition satisfies about 1/3 of our energy needs, and is primarily directed towards core metabolism. 1/3. The other 2/3 comes from what is generally called thermal sources. Sunshine. You what? Nobody ever taught me that before. But yeah. For example, let me put it on the negative. These are these camp chairs I see you in your Facebook things all the time, right? When you're roaming around.
Oh, maybe so.
Aren't they? Yeah, I recognize them. If there's no light and there's no heat, how long do you live? It's called freezing to death in the dark. Right? Well, wait a minute. Let me think about that for a moment. Because, you know, there are these people that are so-called breatharians, and others that don't say, if there are people, they're not even breatharians. You put them in a box, put them in the ground for a few days or a few weeks and take them out, and they go like that. And So what's going on? Take a flashlight, and I don't mean like a super cool new LED, just a dumb old flashlight. In a dark room, turn it on, put it to the palm of your hand, look at the back of your hand, what do you see? Red, orange, kind of yellow, right? Which means those longer wavelengths are going straight through your hand and coming out the other side, so you can see them. Even a weak, I would say dumbass, but I don't swear, right? So, see, I have to do all this editing later on, right? I try to resist it, right? No, but there's some people, if they see it on the internet, they think I'm a bad guy, you know. So, anyway, even the silly old primitive flashlight can generate enough light to go a couple of inches straight through skin, muscle, bone, fascia, and come out the other side. So what do you think what happens when you go stand out there in the sunshine and expose your skin? The sunshine, those long wavelengths, are penetrating at least through the epidermis, dermis, and the subcutaneous or adipose, call it whatever, into the capillary network of the body. You're actually absorbing, you're eating light right into your bloodstream when you go in the sunshine. Come on.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's where we get most of our energy, the excitation from thermal sources, what we call light and heat, which is essentially the same thing. We can generate, fire, heat, and things, but it's mostly sunshine. So the idea of putting light in the blood may seem radical, but the fact is it's the dominant source of our energy. The activation, the photonic excitation that goes into the tissue, into the bloodstream, then moves throughout the whole body and offloads at the areas of highest metabolic demand. Think of it in terms of chemistry, and I always say the same stupid example. When you eat an apple, how does the nutrition from that apple know how to get to your right big toe? It's not like you buy apples that are coded for your right big toe, like it's a DNA kind of a thing. I mean, how does it know where to go? How does the nutrition know where to go? This is the whole thing, even about DNA. DNA can replicate, but I mean, why don't you just grow a leg out the side of your head? It can replicate it, but how does it know where to be and what to go? So there's this whole domain of biophysics that we've kind of just not been told about. We haven't paid attention. We haven't taken advantage of it. So when I made the decision to design the Neurolight processes based on a complex adaptive system, the brain, whatever that means. Here, Joan, you're trained in Oriental medicine, other people are. If I go like this, right, what does that mean to you, right? Right, the 3C.
3, yeah.
Right, the Danqians, right? That Taoism recognized a long time ago that there were these 3 energetic centers. They didn't much care what they looked like. I mean, the lungs looked like a bunch of leaves for all they cared. That's how they showed them. They were functionalists. So that's why I was saying earlier on, to really be good with the neuroplasticity, in this case to be good with the Neurolight, there are some basic principles that may have to change in your view of reality, in your view of what makes a me, even. And right now everybody's totally freaked out about the sun. You're going to burst into flames with the horrible cancer if you go in the sun and all of that. And it turns out, solariums and the spas and where you would go to heal before there was so much chemistry is fresh air by the ocean in the sun. You take sun bath. And actually you are eating light. Light is the body's favorite food. It converts everything over into light in the end. That last electron jump, when that electron jumps orbit, boom, boom, and the famous quantum leap. That leap liberates energy in the form of what's called a biophoton. So much so now that with these biophoton amplifiers, it's measurable. We know the wavelengths. We know that it has 540 green, and and the depends on the blue which one you want to do. Like 320 or something is like, but around 410, and then we know the red, and we know the near infrared because it's measured now. It's like getting on a scale and measuring. I know I weigh 185 pounds. I just measured it. Well, we know what the biophoton wavelength is because we just measured it. Not in the U.S. This is mostly all German, but so. In designing the Neuralite, I thought there's got to be this issue because the degree of available energy for extra demand varies from person to person. It's called a chi deficiency. So I think, well, if I'm going to take them into the brain gym to do fundamental exercise, which we'll talk about after lunch, or into brain skills, which are complex compositions for new learning, you might have a Maserati, but if the gas tank is empty, you're not going anywhere. If the person's vitality, we'll call it, and I mean this, in their capacity to generate sufficient levels of ATP to match the physical demand, if that capacity is subadequate, giving them something good is going to be experienced as something bad. It's a perfectly good exercise, but the problem is that they're going to feel badly from it because they can't meet the demand. If it was academic, they would get an F, they'd fail, or maybe at least a D, which is what my physics professor finally agreed to give me so I could get out of school. The problem is I didn't go to class. Nobody went to class. That's why I changed my major to English literature, because it was for my bachelor's. It was the easiest one to get without going to class. Right? You could BS any kind of final exam, and if you're smart enough, just read the back of the book and anyway. But physics was tricky, right? He was so disgusted with me, right? Because I wrote the physics exam thinking I could write a physics exam. I wrote all the others. My philosophy is one of the big things, the 10-page essay thing, and I wrote one sentence. I think, this is, there's nothing much more to say. I mean, everything is just an elaboration on this one sentence. So I thought, okay, try that. Got A+, right? So I thought I'd try the same thing with the physics. It didn't work out. So and I said, listen, I only need this one course to get my degree, right? Can I please do a rewrite? He says, okay, I'll give you an oral, right? Come back in 1 week. I came back in 1 week to his lab. He hated teaching. That was one thing. He only wanted to do research, so that's why he taught physics to arts majors, right? Because we were all the idiots. It didn't really matter. So, I don't know why I'm telling this story, it's just funny. And so, I did the exam, and he was so disgusted with me. I was a hippie at the time, and he wasn't. And he said, with like seething in his voice, my 12-year-old daughter knows more physics than you do. And I said, yes, I know. I'm sure she does. He said, okay. He said, and he gave me a D, so I got my degree. So I've learned more physics since then. I guess is what I'm trying to let you know is that I've learned more since then. Okay, it's like, why go to class when you could be having fun? It was 1969, 1970. What are you supposed to do? Give me a break. So in designing the Neuralite, it's the appreciation that what we'll call general vitality is required when you increase demand for new learning. It's not difficult. It's like, well, that makes sense. You burn a number of calories every day just because you're alive, but if you do some extra activity, you're going to burn more calories, meaning that you're generating and using more energy, because it's always an ATP issue. So I thought, well, shoot, if we try to do these things with the brain using sensory signaling, but the vitality is low, the probability of integration is going to be poor. So what can I do about that? Well, pretty obvious. I've been doing all this light stuff. We need to include some way of introducing supplemental ATP into the system so that there's a better likelihood that the demand will have sufficient energy to fulfill itself. And I started off with the transcranial light as the component for this. If you Google transcranial anything, it'll pop transcranial magnetic, because that's the new darling right now. It creates hemispheric stimulation and excitation, so it potentiates a lot of states. It's very cool and very interesting, but it's non-vectored, meaning it doesn't have anything specific. You have to supply the specificity. It's like you want to drive someplace, but there's no GPS. It's just going to but it's fantastic. But if you go Googling the transcranial light or transcranial photobiomodulation, different terms, what you're going to see is amazing, really encouraging stuff. That with the right rig, and LEDs are fine, superluminous. There's a Canadian company, it's called V-Light, like C'est la vie, V, French, it's French-Canadian. It's the Life Light. And they have a unit, it's about $1,500. On top of the Neurolite price, it's like, this is getting pretty expensive. There's a lot of very good studies. They're the first company in the West to try to commercialize it. We've been making these, because I live in the Orient now. In Taiwan and Korea and China, we've been making those units for a long while. They've been marketing them under hair growth, because there's certain types of baldness that respond well to LED or low-level laser stimulation. But they looked really dumb. The first ones, they use bicycle helmets, and they put the LEDs in a bicycle helmet. And I said, well, dude, that looks like Christmas time with a bicycle helmet. It looked lame, it didn't look credible for what it was capable of doing. And now it's progressed, and this V-Light, you can go online and see it, and it's kind of modular. We tested a bunch of all these different things. And it's really hard to engineer and design wearable technology. Designing boxes and things, it's not a problem, because it's pretty much a box or a sphere or something. But when you've got to wear it, wearable technology is hard to design, and it's really expensive to get it right, because it may, it may look like you put it together with duct tape and spit, but it works, but it looks lousy. So research this. This will impress you, because it's in the domain of neuroplasticity. That if you get it has to be long. It's a near infrared, and if you get the dosage right, it'll shine through the skin, through the skull bone, through the dura mater, pia mater, some of the sloshy liquid, and into the first millimeter or two of the neocortex. You can actually shine light, and the brain eats it. The mitochondria eat it directly. It's a direct stimulation to upregulate ATP. For sure. And it's crazy how well it works. It's crazy how well it works. There are big studies, one of the big black holes is called major depressive disorder, MDD. Everything is an acronym anymore, MDD, major depressive disorder. These people live in the deep dark hole. And this is full on, this is, Ivy League studies and the best of the best. Some of the best research in the country is University of Texas at Austin. They specialize in the transcranial light stimulation. And the neuroplasticity for traumatic brain injury, the leading center in the world is University of Alabama at Birmingham. So some of the stuff is happening now here in the U.S. of A. It isn't all in, Gottlieb, Germany, and places like that, where they are like decades ahead. 10 minutes of shining light inside the brain, major depressive disorder, and significant positive and measurable results of benefit for 2 to 4 weeks from 10 minutes of light in the brain. It's not boring you, I won't take the time to list all the different things that are responding to shining light into the neocortex. Now understand, the neocortex is only a couple of millimeters thick, not even, thin. So it's the outer coating of the brain, but a lot of important stuff happens there. The light doesn't go any further than that, but there's a lot of concept, maybe there's cascades and so on. So that's where I started for the brain food and the Neurolite, was the idea of transcranial. And I say, hey, if you got enough money, just go online, V-Light, and buy one. They're fantastic for what they do. Because, the brain consumes 10 times more, the average brain state consumes 10 times more energy than any other organ in the body. It's hungry. If you look at any of the models of the vascular network that supplies the brain, you think, that's a lot of blood. That's a lot of blood. And you don't even see the microstructures on these models. Those are just the macrostructures. It's like, why does the brain need that much blood? Well, because it's the transport system. And there's a lot of extended theory about that. But it's a transport system, not just for molecules. It's a transport system for the photoactivation that's in the blood. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, what happens to the brain with people that go into these 14-day darkness retreats?
Yeah, that's an interesting subject that we'll talk about privately, perhaps, because it's a bit odd for most people. I'm actually a very fortunate person that I've been trained in that tradition, so I know those practices. That's a big subject. It's a very, very nice one. I have to not want to talk about it right now. Okay. Yes, sir.
Can you have too much supplemental ATP introduced into the brain, or does it operate like does it stop?
I don't know an absolute answer with confidence, so I'll tell you what I understand, and it may need to be modified. It's always possible to have too much of something. Now, whether the too much is just like, in the earlier days when everybody was taking 40 supplements, I remember this doc friend of mine, gave me all these things, and obviously when guys take a leak, we tend to stand up, and I looked down, and I swear I was pissing like neon yellow green. I never saw anything that brilliant except a neon light, and it was my urine. It's because there was so much supplementation that I couldn't assimilate that certain nutrients just go into excretion and you throw them off. I'm not sure, but there is the issue of dosage. There is an issue of dosage. So my assumption is, absolutely, if you had a transcranial unit, for example, conventionally, at calculated dosage, where you reach dosage, the dosage is calculated as 60 joules. There are all these ways of calculating it. And depending whether you're doing clinical or it's more commercial, in clinical they don't care what your reaction, they just do it. It usually takes 10 minutes. And the commercial unit now, it's calculated for dosage around 20 minutes, because 10 minutes seems too fast and half an hour is too long, so 20 minutes seems reasonable. And the idea is that for the normal person seeking supplementation, increasing vitality, you do it once every 2 days. So one meal lasts 2 days. And for people that are in brain trauma rehabilitation, severe anatomy loss. Oftentimes they'll have them do it on a daily basis, but oftentimes break it into 2 smaller increments instead of 1 big hunk. You know, the more you need, the less you can do. I mean, if somebody is really trashed, there's very little that you can do for them. A little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, because they don't have the capacity to integrate a lot of signaling. So I'll admit a lack of understanding and some ignorance about that. My basic premise with the Neurolite is attempt to achieve the most while doing the least. If you're going to err on the conservative side. It's much better to err by not having done quite enough than it is to err by having done too much, and then you've got to deal with the backlash. So I think common sense says enough is enough. I mean, you can't sleep for 9 days in a row unless you're sick. You know, the body just stops you from sleeping at a certain point. So my suspicion is there is too much, but I'm not clear about whether it's like the neon P, whether the body just trashes and degrades it and you metabolize it through your liver and it doesn't matter, or whether there's some kind of irritable reaction. But dosage is an issue. So it's always better to, you know, follow the guidelines and you're going to be safe. Resist that more is better thing. I mean, I learned that a long time ago with chocolate cake. You know.
Now, and when you talked about those dosages, the 10 or the 20, are you referring to an ATP supplementer like the V-Lite or the Neurolite?
I'll clarify that. I was talking about the V-Lite in that case. With the Neurolite, let's be clear that the brain food little thing and the flashy flickering light is a different thing. The flashy flickering light is not brain food. It's not designed to enter into the bloodstream. The wavelength of the LEDs is a very high, cool blue. Very, very short wavelengths have a lot of energy, but they don't penetrate the medium at all. They bounce off. That's why you put the flashlight on your hand, you see the red and the orange coming through. You don't see blue and green because those wavelengths don't penetrate. Long wavelengths penetrate. So red and near infrared will go more deeply and go through. The LED, the flashy stuff with the Neurolite, is on the other end. It's cool blue white. So it's not going to penetrate through in your skin and into the blood. No way. We use a retinal visual cortex neurology with the colors and the patterns and the brain signaling, and for the sound we use the cerebellum, right? And then there's an integration in the limbic system. But let's not confuse. What I'm talking about right now, the brain food, is the thing that you stick in your nose, because getting it in the blood is the goal. The transcranial is not trying to get it into the blood. It's trying to put it directly into the nerve cells of the neocortex. What I like about the nose thing, and you can also do it, you know, you can do it transcutaneous, but the skin is thicker and more opaque than the mucosa inside the nose. It's practically transparent, it's translucent. And the capillary network is so dense inside the nose, and for Orientalists we know the 6 main meridians converge here as well, that the intranasal is really good. I have devices where you put it over veins, and there's a lot of ways. This is not new stuff, it's old stuff. It's 20, 25 years old. And the clinical use is overwhelming in Asia, especially in China and Russia. It's like, well, yeah, of course, you know, why are we even talking about this? Putting this in the nose, the idea is that the mucosa is so, it's like a window almost, and the capillary network is dense. Nobody knows exactly where the activation grabs on, because it's not the red blood cell, because it's red. The red blood cell rejects red. That's why it's red. Right? I mean, leaves are, when we say eat your greens, we actually mean eat your blues and your reds. Because the green is not absorbed, it bounces off. So all the things that we see that look green are actually the blues and the reds. So eat your blues and reds, because it looks green just because that tissue won't accept that wavelength of light, so it bounces off, and we get to see what's bouncing off. So when you put red light into the bloodstream, the red blood cells couldn't care less. But there are a lot of other microscopic elements in the plasma, and some of the advanced theory says the activation is actually held because the excitement structures the aqueous base of the plasma, that it's actually putting the blood in a structured water state, and that when it comes into areas where there's metabolic demand, the excitation offloads. This is one of the marvelous things. It's like nutrition, that when you put this stuff into your blood, it will offload preferentially. Wherever the metabolic demand is highest, that's where it gets offloaded. It's like the complex adaptive system is very compassionate. It's not greedy. Goes where it needs. This introduces one of the contraindications for the brain food. People with diagnosed cancer. It's only a theoretical contraindication. It's never been proven to be true, but it follows the principle that if a person has a current active cancer, we put in a new SD card. If a person has a current active cancer, it's well known that cancer states have high metabolic demand. So with this activation free floating through the system, there is the theoretical potential that the cancer would take advantage of that supplemental activity and upregulate its metabolism. So across the board, like with flickering light, people that are prone to seizures and epilepsy, it's a contraindication because it may trigger a seizure. For the brain food, people that have a current diagnosed cancer, the caution is don't use it on a theoretical basis. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but that has to be stated because that's a conventional statement based on a theory. It reminds me of the old theory of you can't give massage to a person with cancer, because the theory was the massage mobilizes the lymph, cancer tends to metastasize through the lymphatic system, you're going to spread the cancer throughout the body by giving them a massage. We know that's absurd, because that means you couldn't walk, you couldn't move. Anything that moved the lymph was going to cause your cancer to metastasize. And there was also, the Dental Society initiated the early contraindication that pregnant women cannot receive massage. And it was actually the Dental Association that